Alright, now let's do a little reading. We're going to talk about Newton's second law of motion. Newton's first law of motion is limited, since it only tells you what happens to objects if net force acts upon them. Knowing that objects at rest have a tendency to remain at rest, and that objects in motion will continue in motion, does not provide enough information to analyze collisions. Newton's second law allows you to make predictions about what happens when an external force is applied to an object. If you were to place a collision cart on a level surface, that's like a little toy car, it would not move because it's on a level surface. However, if you begin to push the cart, it will begin to move. Newton's second law states, if a body is acted on by a force, it will accelerate in the direction of the unbalanced force. The acceleration will be larger for smaller masses. The acceleration can be an increase in speed, a decrease in speed, or a change in direction. Okay, that's worth repeating. The acceleration, remember, acceleration is any change in velocity. If the velocity stays the same, there's no acceleration. If the velocity changes, if it speeds up, if it slows down, if it changes direction, all of those things are called acceleration. And the acceleration can be, well, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Newton's second law of motion indicates that the change in motion is determined by the force acting on the object and the mass of the object itself. Analyzing the rear end collision. The activity, and that's the model from the other video with the toy car and the giraffe car. This activity demonstrated the effects of a rear-end collision. Newton's first law and Newton's second law can help explain the whiplash injury that passengers suffer during this kind of collision. Imagine looking at the rear-end collision in slow motion. Think about all the things that happen. So think about that giraffe car moving down the ramp, accelerating down the ramp in slow motion. And it accelerates and it accelerates and it moves until it hits that car in front of it. And then it transfers all of its momentum, or most of its momentum. Well, it transfers some or all of its momentum to the car in front. And that car takes off. Now imagine a car... Ooh, go away. Now imagine a car stopped at a red light. This is the car in which the driver is going to be injured with whiplash. The driver is at rest within the car. The stopped car gets hit from the rear. The car begins to move. The back of the seat pushes the driver forward, and his torso gets pushed forward by the seat in the car. But the driver's head is not supported, and so it doesn't get pushed forward with the torso and the car. It gets kind of left behind. The neck muscles hold the head to the torso as the body moves forward. The muscles then whip the head forward. The head keeps moving until it gets ahead of the torso. The head is stopped by the neck muscles. The muscles pull the head back to its usual position. Ouch! Now let's repeat the description of the collision and insert all of the places where Newton's first law is happening. Newton's first law states that an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion, unless acted upon by an unbalanced outside force. So, picture that same car stopped at that same red light. This is the car in which the driver is going to be injured with whiplash. The driver is at rest within the car. They're stopped. Newton's first law applies here. It says an object at rest stays at rest. And we're talking about the driver. The driver is at rest. Inertia says that the driver will resist any kind of, it's going to stay at rest unless there's an outside force. Then the stopped car gets hit from the rear. The car begins to move. The back of the seat pushes the driver forward and his torso moves with the car. Newton's first law. An object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced outside force. Why does the person's torso move forward? Because the seat that he's sitting in is an unbalanced outside force, and it's pushing on his torso. The driver's head is not supported and stays back where it is. Now, Newton's first law applies because an object at rest wants to stay at rest. If there's nothing pushing the head forward, it's not going to do anything. In fact, it's not going to do anything until the neck muscles pull on it. The neck muscles hold the head to the body as the body moves forward. The muscles then whip the head forward. Newton's first law explains this. An object, the head, at rest, stays at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced outside force. What is the unbalanced outside force that makes the head go forward at this point? Yeah, the unbalanced outside force is the neck muscles. The neck muscles are outside of the head, and so they start pulling on the head, and that makes it go forward. And then, once the head gets momentum, it's moving, and the head keeps moving until it gets ahead of the torso. Newton's first law explains this. An object, the head, in motion, wants to stay in motion. The head is stopped by the neck muscles again. So first, the neck muscles pull the head forward, and then the head gets momentum and it's going forward. But then the neck muscles stop it from going too far forward. Newton's first law, an object, the head, in motion, stays in motion unless acted upon by an unbalanced outside force, the neck muscles. The muscles pull the head back to its usual position. Newton's first law, an object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced outside force. Ouch. Now let's repeat the description of the collision one more time and insert all of the places where Newton's second law applies. Newton's second law states that all accelerations are caused by unbalanced outside forces. And the equation for that is force equals mass times acceleration. Alright, so here we go, one more time. A car is stopped at a red light. This is the car in which the driver is going to be injured with whiplash. The driver is at rest within the car. The stopped car gets hit from the rear. The car begins to move. Newton's second law is at play here. the car accelerates because of the unbalanced outside force from the rear. What is the unbalanced outside force? No, it's the car behind it crashing into you. That's the unbalanced outside force. Now, how big is that force? How big is that outside force? Well, it depends on the mass of the car behind you and the acceleration of the car behind you. The back of the seat pushes the driver forward and his torso moves with the car. Newton's second law says the torso accelerates. Okay, it goes from not moving to moving. It changes velocity. It accelerates because of the unbalanced outside force. What is the unbalanced outside force moving the torso? Well, it's the back of the seat pushing on the torso. And how big of a force that is depends on the mass. In this case, would it be the mass of the seat or the mass of the whole car? Well, because the seat is bolted to the car and they move together, this would be the mass of the whole car, including the seat. And the acceleration of the car. The whole car, including the seat. The driver's head is not supported, and so the car and the torso move forward, and the head doesn't move forward yet. But then the neck muscles hold the head to the torso as the body moves forward. The muscles then whip the head forward. Newton's second law says the head accelerates. Okay, it goes from resting to all of a sudden moving forward because of the unbalanced force of the muscles. F equals ma. The head keeps moving until it gets ahead of the torso. The head is stopped by the neck muscles again. Newton's second law, the head accelerates. Okay, this time the change in velocity is going from moving to not moving. It accelerates, it slows down because of the unbalanced force from the neck muscles. F equals ma. The muscles pull the head back to its usual position. Newton's second law, the head accelerates because of the unbalanced force from the rear. F equals ma. Ouch. So, Newton's second law informs you that all accelerations are caused by unbalanced outside forces. It does not say that all forces cause accelerations. An object at rest may have many forces acting upon it. When you hold a book in your hand, the book is at rest. It's not moving, right? It's just in your hand. There is a force of gravity pulling on the book. So that's a force that's pulling on the book. And yet the book is not moving. There is a force of your hand pushing, well, the hand pushing the book up. Or if, you know, I'm picturing a person with their arm down by their side. So in that case, you know, the hand would be pulling the book up. But if your hand was under the book, then I guess it would be pushing the book up. These forces are equal and opposite. Okay, so they basically cancel each other out. And when they cancel each other out, the net force on the book is 0 because the two forces balance each other. And when the net force is 0, then we basically say there's no there's no forces acting on that book which can cause acceleration. So there's no acceleration because there's no net force. So gravity pulls down, your hand pushes up or pulls up. There's no net force. So the net force is any extra force that's left over after everything has been canceled out. So both forces act through the center of the book. They are shifted a bit in the diagram to emphasize that the upward force of the hand acts on the bottom of the book, and the downward force of gravity acts on the middle of the book. As a car moves down the highway at a constant speed, there are forces acting on the car, but there is no acceleration. That might be a little bit different to imagine. If you're driving in a car down the road and you're going fast, let's say you're going 90 miles an hour, like I see some people driving on the freeway sometimes, it's a little bit weird just to think of that as there being no acceleration. But acceleration is a change in speed. So if you're constantly going 90 miles per hour, there's zero acceleration. And if there's zero acceleration, then that indicates that all the forces are balanced. There's no net force on that car. There's forces, but they all cancel each other out. The force of the engine on the tires and road moving the car forward must be equal and opposite to the force of the air pushing the car backward. These forces balance each other in this case where the speed is not changing. There is no net force and there is no acceleration. The car is going fast, but there's no net force and there's no acceleration. The car stays in motion at a constant speed. A similar situation occurs when you push a book across a table at constant speed. The push is to the right and the friction is to the left, opposing motion. If the forces are equal in size, there is no net force on the book and the book does not accelerate. It moves with a constant speed or a constant velocity. Reflecting on the activity and the challenge. So think back to when we were playing with Mr. Carter's toys and the giraffe car slammed into the car in front. And think about a real car crash. And think about a person's head being whipped back and then whipped forward. The vertebral column, okay, that's your spine. The vertebral column becomes thinner and the bones become smaller at the top of the spine where the spine attaches to the skull. The attachment bones are supported by the least amount of muscle. Unfortunately, the smaller bones with less muscle support make this area particularly susceptible to injury. One of the greatest dangers following whiplash is the damage to the brainstem. The brainstem is particularly vital to life support because it regulates blood pressure and breathing movements. Consider how your safety device will help prevent whiplash following a collision. What part of the restraining device prevents the movement of the head? All right. Finally, I want you to consider where is it? Is it even in here? Oh dear. All right. I want you to consider a jar with a cork tied to a string, and the other end of that string taped to the bottom of the lid of the jar. So cork, string, tape. We tape that to the lid of the jar. We fill the jar with water, and we mark one side of it with an X. We use a Sharpie marker and we mark one side of it with the X. So we fill it up with water, we put the lid on, and we turn it upside down and put it on a table. Well, of course the cork is going to float, right? But it's not going to float all the way up to the top because there's a string holding it down. So here we go. We turn it so that the X is facing this direction. And in one gentle but quick movement, we're going to move that jar from here to here. And so my question for you is, what is the cork going to do as we push the jar across the table? So we push the jar across the table. The X is in front. What is going to happen to this cork? Well, theoretically, and unfortunately I didn't have a jar and a cork laying around to try this out with. I really wanted to, actually. I wanted to try it out. But theoretically, the cork should be like the head of a person in a car accident. And the jar would be the car, right? So if we push on the jar and the jar moves forward, well, what should happen is the cork should move away from the X as it's sliding across the table. Not towards the X, should move away. And why is that? How would a scientist explain that? Well, a scientist would say, okay, Newton's first law of motion says that an object at rest wants to stay at rest. So this cork should want to resist any changes, any changes in velocity. So the cork should resist any acceleration. When we push it forward, it says, no, I don't want to move. I want to keep resting. But the string ends up pulling it against its will. And so it's trying to stay at rest, but it can't.